The deserts and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it, the splendor of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear. Your God will come, he will come with vengeance. With divine retribution, he will come to save you. Then will the eyes of the blind be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer, and the mute tongue shout for joy. Water will gush forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. The burning sand will become a pool, the thirsty ground bubbling springs. In the haunts where jackals once lay, grass and reeds and papyrus will grow. And a highway will be there. It will be called the way of holiness. The unclean will not journey on it. It will be for those who walk in that way. Wicked fools will not go on about it. No lion will be there, nor will there be any ferocious beast on it. They will not be found there. But only the redeemed will walk there, and the ransomed of the Lord will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. This is the word of the Lord. Have you ever felt physically feeble? Like totally weak? Fully aware that you can barely do anything that you used to be able to do. So weak feeling that the stairs aren't even an option. Doctor has told you no. So weak that when you wake up, it feels like you haven't slept in a week. So feeble, so weak, so worn out. I was 16 years old when I had what they call adenoids removed. See, these adenoids are behind your nose or kind of by your throat. And unfortunately, my adenoids had gotten infected to the degree where actually I wasn't really breathing when I slept very effectively. So those things had to go. I was pretty alarmed when I visited with the doctor afterwards, and he told me, if you go up the stairs, your heartbeat can move too quickly, and the stitching inside of your head can come undone, and you can bleed out and die. Just from the stairs. I remember after that surgery for the next 2 days, I didn't feel like myself. I was totally weakened. If there was a word to describe how I felt then, it was feeble. And maybe you had your adenoids removed, so you could actually relate to this really well. Maybe you had a different surgery where you were just debilitated. Maybe there are some days where you are so tired that you can relate to that. This idea of being so weak where the most basic things are exhausting. Truth is, it isn't only health issues which can make us feel feeble. Sometimes you might have something happen in your life where it feels like the floor has just been pulled out from under you. And you are weak and you are exhausted, but your heart's beating just fine. Your pulse is normal, but you sure don't feel normal because of the trials you have gone through, because conflict can wreck its way through your life, because grief is powerful. And I think it was also when I was 16 when I realized that that saying, a broken heart, that wasn't just some cliche to sell greeting cards or something like that. When you actually experience relationship problems, it hurts your chest just a little bit. Actually, it can hurt your chest a lot. We go through grief and mourning when relationships go sour, and we can feel just as feeble too, just as weak. Isaiah wrote to an interesting audience, people who were very weak. The thing is, he wrote to them 100 years before their lives would get turned upside down. Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. It was really a matter of when, not if, that would happen. And Isaiah didn't live to see Jerusalem come tumbling down, but God sent him to give a warning to the people of Jerusalem that this is going to be traumatic. This is going to cause fear and heartache and sadness, and this is going to happen solely because you have turned your back on the living, powerful God who loves you more than anything. That would happen. Yet despite the fact that the temple would come tumbling down, and there'd be nothing left in Jerusalem for a time, God in his love would bring those people back from Babylon to Israel. That doesn't really happen very often, especially in the ancient world. If the Assyrians came in and conquered someone, they would just sell them off as slaves, and those people who were conquered, they would lose their history. The fact that Jerusalem, the people who lived in, that they would be a remnant all the way in Babylon, that was no small miracle in and of itself. And yet, despite the fact that they would suffer these trials, despite the fact that they would feel weak, God gives them words to strengthen them. And he says that there in verse 3, strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. When you see the temple in ashes, your knees would give way if you lived there in Jerusalem. In the same way, my knees gave way a little bit on 9/11. In the same way, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, December 7, 1941, people were shocked, people were afraid. Now imagine if it wasn't just an isolated attack, but we actually lost everything. And I mean everything on account of warfare. Well, we would feel afraid. We would lose hope. We would despair naturally. It would take God's grace for us not to. And yet, despite that scene, which the Israelites did see, God could tell them, strengthen your feeble arms. Give your knees strength. Have courage. We can have courage because God's kingdom came, in the sense that Jesus arrived to fulfill those promises, that he as King of Kings and Lord of Lords rescued us from our sin, that he ascended into heaven and rules heaven and earth, ultimately for the good of his church. We have confidence that Christ's kingdom in that sense has come. We have confidence in knowing that Christ's kingdom will come too. When Christ returns again in all of his glory, when Christ brings us to our heavenly home, we have a kingdom that gives us confidence. What does God tell God's people to do in light of this kingdom? Well, verse 4 says, say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear. Your God will come, he will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you. I like the words which began that. Say to them. Sometimes the good news of the gospel, it isn't shared, it isn't spoken, because we tell ourselves, well, they know it all already anyway. And we forget that the good news of Jesus' work is news to be shared repeatedly, especially on those who are weak, especially on those who have had trauma, especially when we feel feeble. The gospel gives so much strength. There's a pastor who served in our sister church body, the Evangelical Lutheran Synod. You might not know much about that body besides the fact that we met one of their pastors about a month ago. They're a group of Norwegian Lutherans historically, quite a bit smaller than the Wisconsin Synod, yet they're still able to operate a college. Some years they've been able to do more mission work in the United States than the much larger Wells has been able to. They have a world mission in Peru, a world mission in Chile, a world mission in India, where they are doing outstanding work. Cool stuff. There was a pastor who served there in the ELS. His son was diagnosed with a disorder that caused him to go completely blind very quickly. And it was so traumatic for his son. It was so traumatic for his life. One thing he noticed, though, was that it just became the elephant in the room. No one would talk about it. He almost felt ashamed about what his son was going through, that he had no idea how to even broach the subject. So many people knew, well, you already know that already, you're a pastor. But was he ever hurting? And not just from the members of his church, he was hurting from fellow pastors who were afraid to speak to him the good news that God will not abandon his people even in setback. The fact that God tells us to say to the people who feel feeble the good news, that brings courage. Well, that means this is something that we're going to want to share regularly. After all, the church, we rejoice with those who rejoice, we mourn with those who mourn. It's good for us to look for opportunities to see how we can bring Christ to a world which is hurting. Because after all, it's Christ who will strengthen. It's amazing just when you consider God's grace that he would arrive to strengthen us in our weakness, that he would send his Holy Spirit to give us hope where there was none. Because if someone disobeyed everything you had asked of them, if someone blatantly disregarded your feelings and your intentions, if someone took advantage of you, if someone at the same time doubted you, at the same time hated you, I don't think you would do anything nice for them. Yet all of us have done all those things and more to God, in the things that we have said to other people, in the things which we have done, and the things that we haven't done. All of us have mistreated God terribly. Yet he doesn't arrive to slap us across the face. He doesn't arrive to humiliate. He doesn't arrive to remind us that we're feeble so often because of the messes that we ourselves have made. He arrives to say, I forgive you. He arrives to point to those holes in his hands, and to the holes in his hands, the holes in his feet, the holes in his side, and says, it's finished. See, my work is complete. You are in my family. Jesus arrives to bring us hope where there was none. Jesus arrives to bring us life when we deserve death and hell. When you think about the facts, we have a lot to put our courage in. God won't fail you. God will keep you on the path to heaven through word and sacrament. He will not stop working through these means of grace. He will be there today, just like he has been there for you yesterday, and he will be there for you tomorrow as well. We have courage because we know what tomorrow will bring. No, I guess I don't mean tomorrow as in December 15th. I mean eternity. It brings paradise. It brings a reunion of all the saints. It brings an existence where everything is right and nothing is messed up. Isaiah points to that in just the beauty that we have here with heaven. That the lame will leap like a deer, the mute tongue will shout for joy. That the pain, the infirmities, the challenges that we can face here, those will be ancient history there. And at the end of the day, we know that the ransom of the Lord will return. Everlasting joy will crown your heads. Gladness and joy will overtake all your sorrow. Grief will flee away. We have a lot to put our courage in when we consider what our God has done. In heaven, those fears will flee away. Our griefs will flee away. Our sorrows will flee away. You know, Jesus is there to chase those things away here too, as he reminds us that he will pick us up when we fall down, that he is our strength in all our weakness, and that ultimately our strength comes from him. It doesn't depend on your work, your efforts, just his love and mercy. Friends, have courage. We have a lot to look forward to, and God will bless us every step of the way until we get to our heavenly goal.